Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoy this new show, whether you're viewing it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the episode. I do want to thank you for being part of my audience. You can also find links to videos or podcasts on MiamiGhostChronicles.com, as well as where you can submit your story about any eerie experiences you've had, which I would love to hear about. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab. Please subscribe to our channel so that you receive notification of when we release a new show. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where I usually live stream and where I give you a behind-the-scenes look at locations where new episodes are being filmed at. I also tell you about all the interesting guests that will be appearing soon on Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you enjoy the show, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. And how are you all doing today? I don't know about you, but I'm doing great. And I'm doing great, especially because of the guest I'm going to have. This is a lady, which we could do a show just on what we talk about before we started recording. Her name is Paige Valdiserri. And Paige is an internationally recognized traumatic stress and integrative healing consultant. She's a highly regarded speaker, author, consultant, healer, coach, and trainer. And her international work at the corporate level has empowered thousands of individuals on the front lines of stress to go from a place of personal fracturing back to wholeness. Whether it's recovering from war zones, natural disasters, sexual violence, medical/chronic illnesses, intense professional corporate settings, life-changing personal events, and or ongoing spiritual growth. Clients and organizations have described her as a teacher, a guide, a healer, a spiritual intuitive, and a reflection of themselves. She's a board-certified expert in traumatic stress. She's also a licensed professional counselor and energy medicine healer, biodynamic craniosacral trauma therapist, body therapist, master Reiki teacher, biofeedback practitioner, shamanic healer, spiritual intuitive Kundalini yoga instructor, subconscious restructive coach, clairvoyant empath, and body intuitive. And right now, right before I bring her on, as a matter of fact, we were talking here in Florida. We recently had this school shooting where 17 people lost their lives, 14 of them high school students. And we're going to talk about that type of trauma as well, but how it expresses itself in the organic body, among other things. But anyway, Paige, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Marlene. I'm excited to be here.
No.
Thank you for having me. And yes, you and I could talk forever about so many different topics. That's for sure. I know.
It's it's like I was looking at your book. I was looking at I could do a week worth of show with Paige because there's so much out there. And we spoke briefly because a lot of this has nothing to do. I love Western medicine, and especially when it comes to trauma to the body, as far as helping or saving somebody's life. But, and we talked about it, there's more to a human being. There's also a mind-body connection as far as what happens to us, that sometimes even, let's say if you suffer a trauma, let's say a car accident, whatever, and you go into the hospital and you get medical attention and they save your life. But then there's other things that go on with us, whether it's our mind or our spirit, that sometimes is traumatized as well, but Western medicine sometimes doesn't address that, does it?
No, it doesn't. That's why I'm a firm believer of integration of Eastern and Western medicine together. It doesn't have to be this or that, black or white. We have so many options. It's all about integration.
Right, because and sometimes you're absolutely right, because some people think it's either one or the other. You either include one and exclude the other.
Right.
You'll have some people which is like strictly medicine, like medical. Um, if I give you either the treatment or the pill or the surgery, and that's that, and you heal. And then other people don't want to use medicine, which I think is a mistake as well, because a lot of advances have been made to help people in their body to heal. That without those medicines, you would have died a few years ago, for example.
Right. Right.
So, and what happened? Because I know that you've worked a lot of times with people that have suffered trauma of some type or other. And what happens when they come to you? What do they describe as far as what they need help with?
Well, I think we first need to say what is trauma, because like you and I talked about, is that people think trauma are the big things that happen in life, the school shootings, the terrorist attacks, the murders, the car accidents. But what I'm here to say is trauma is how we personalize it. So I want to just give an example. Back at the Pentagon during 9/11, a good friend of mine who was an FBI agent had been going through the Pentagon, picking up the body parts, doing what he needed to do.
Wow.
And that didn't bother him as much. What was the straw that broke his back was that he picked up a finger, and it was a ring finger, and it had wedding rings on it. And he started to decompensate, because it wasn't so much about, yes, 9/11 was horrible, but for him, that finger that he picked up was a female ring finger with wedding rings on it, and he was going through a separation and pending divorce. So for him, it triggered everything about the potential loss of a relationship that he was having, and it also triggered his past cumulative traumas that he never dealt with. So it's all how we personalize what's happening, because we don't know what somebody brings to the present day. We don't know all of the things that they bring in their bag since they came into this lifetime. So does that make sense as far as
absolutely.
Our listeners hear that?
Right, and like sometimes that, like you say, that one incident or witnessing is the tipping point.
Yeah.
That it overcomes them. Like you said, they've had this and this, and they kind of like handle it, kind of. And then they have that one incident, like you said, where he found that finger, and it's everything just, it accumulates and it overwhelms. And I know that in some cases, and this is the thing, a lot of people, stuff like this is not a one size fit all. I think some people handle events differently. Some people can go, let's say, through what you just described, which is horrific, where you're going through body parts, and for lack of a better word, they can handle it. If that's, in other words, that they can do it. And then there's other people that absolutely cannot. Not everybody. So I imagine that for you, you're going to have people that have been traumatized by certain things, whereas another person, that wouldn't have fazed them, because we're all individuals, even when it comes to how we react to trauma.
Yeah, I always say that trauma and what happens to us and how we respond is all in the eyes of the beholder. So, it all depends on, what's going on in our life, our resiliency level, if we're having any medical issues. And, you asked me, how do people show up? Well, I see people in every kind of population, every type of career, every type of socioeconomic background. And I've traveled internationally, and I continually see the same theme, that the body holds the story. So many times people show up with medical conditions or injuries or physical or chronic pain or chronic whatever it might be. And yes, what happens is they might focus on the medical, but underneath all that is the story or stories that have gone on in their lifetime that they either didn't face, couldn't face, there wasn't any help to face it, they didn't know that small event really lodged somewhere. So let me just tell your listeners that trauma lodges in the autonomic nervous system, the endocrine system, all your fluids, your organs, and your musculoskeletal system. So you can go to see a therapist and you can talk about it and do certain things in the brain, but you have to get into the body because it's all connected. And then like you said before, there's a spiritual component, or if you have a faith base, all of that plays a whole other picture in, getting better health, recovery, or being angry because, wait a minute, I believed this and now this has happened, and it shakes
Right.
people's, foundation in every way.
And Paige, do you have, because I know sometimes it takes people a while, especially if things have happened to them as children.
Hmm.
In other
Hmm.
words, they were of an age where either they couldn't defend themselves or leave the situation that was,
Yeah.
and now that they're adults and they kind of grow up and they come to the realization that what happened to them was wrong, that in other words are ready to face it. I imagine people do come to you, I imagine, years after things happen to them, right?
Well, yeah, and when we're kids, we do the best we can to cope in situations that we
Yes.
don't have a lot of control in. So we develop really good coping strategies for a child that might be healthy or very unhealthy. And then we become an adult and we don't assess, hey, did those coping styles that I used growing up, do they still work for me as an adult? No one teaches us that what we use as a child a lot of times doesn't work as well
Right, right.
as an adult. So they usually don't. There might be a few things that do, but I also want to tell your listeners that, for me, what I've seen, I don't ever point blame because we are spiritual beings living in this human form. So
Hmm.
when you come into this lifetime, we are experiencing so many different things. And, I have seen in my own life and doing this work is that there are always gifts and messages in the most horrific, challenging, difficult times where we just can't escape the pain. And it's how do you unpack the bag to find out what is the message in something that's so horrific? And people will say, how can there be any kind of message in something horrific? You won't see it right away. And
Hmm.
that's the challenging part of being human, is to kind of go, oh my gosh, how do I take what happened to me and figure out the whys behind it? What am I supposed to learn? Like we talked about the school shooting, how could there ever be anything good or a message that comes out of a parent losing a child?
Right,
And that's an
exactly.
individual journey for each person. It's really challenging living in this lifetime and in the world where we are today, because so many things are so violent and intense, and difficult.
Yes. And I think and I imagine what you said also, that some people, when things like this, especially if they think of themselves as being a good person or a good family, and when something, let's say, like that happens, either to their child, which I think has got to be one of the most difficult things for a parent, or to themselves, and
Hmm.
they kind of feel like, why did this happen to me? Sometimes we'll get into that thing like, this is a bad thing, and I'm a good person, so why did this happen to me? Or like you said, in this case where somebody lost their child in this act of violence, where none of them had done anything to the perpetrator except living their lives normally, and then their world kind of like collapses in on them.
Yeah.
Okay? Because sometimes, and I'm going to give you an example, sometimes people involve themselves in risky behavior, whether they go to the wrong place, and it's like when something bad happens, it's like, well, you knew that you were going into either living a lifestyle or a situation where you were running a risk. But when you have people sometimes that are living a normal lifestyle, sending your child to school as an example, which you consider a safe activity, and then something like this happens, I think that, like you said, sometimes it's very difficult for them to understand that there is something in there for them, even though initially I imagine it might be too painful for them to try to flush it out, find it, come to grips with it, or at least salvage something out of the whole. God, it's got to be. I imagine I can't think of anything that could just alter your life to the rest of your days than to have something like this happen.
Yeah, and I have so many people that show up who have had those type of events
Mm-hmm.
occur in their life. Um, and just from my experience of having traumatic events in my life and with all of my clients and patients, I can tell you that a good amount of the time, most people do figure out, okay, what is now my purpose? Well, how am I supposed to be shifting or changing the world or affecting people in a different way so something doesn't happen anymore? Or how do we bring light to the darkest corners that others were afraid to look at? And sometimes it takes those who have gone through hellacious traumatic events to be the ones to step up, to take the flashlights and shine things. Do I wish it was different? Absolutely.
Right.
Unfortunately, we live in this type of lifetime and world where this happens.
Hmm.
So, for me, it's an honor to have somebody shed their complete soul of just gripping pain and difficulty and challenges. But that's where you step into, wherever they have been, whether faith-based, religious, spiritual, there's so much more than this lifetime and in this world. And it really helps, from my experiences, to bring that to people as far as, what goes on outside of this world? Where were we before we stepped into this world? Where
Right.
might we go after this world? And, in my book, Marlene, I give so many different examples of
Okay.
messages that come in from children, from adults who have transitioned. And I don't use the word die as much because
Hmm.
we transition somewhere else from this world. But how many times I've had these children or these adults come in to assist me to help others, or they're assisting their loved ones, or they're assisting just us as humans in this lifetime. So they might not be here in physical form, but
Right.
they're helping in ways that they couldn't before in physical form. We just have to be open to seeing it, hearing it, and connecting to it.
Sure. And unfortunately, the way we view death is very, even if you believe sometimes in an afterlife or heaven, for example,
Yeah.
there's always a very big divide between the living and those that have passed on, as in, I've lost you, either definitely or at least until I end my life.
Right.
Like, and as in I
Good
die.
point.
But from what you're saying is, even though they don't have a physical body anymore, that doesn't mean they've been erased. Um,
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, and that was a really good point that you made, because there is no, again, black or white, this or that. And I teach so many people that come, and I give workshops on this too, of how do you get connected to those who have transitioned? How do you begin to hear and see the messages that they're saying, excuse me, I might not be there in physical form, which is the worst because we're human and we want that connection.
yes.
You can be open and hear the messages from animals, from plants, from other people that just show up for 5 seconds that
Mm-hmm.
give you these messages. They're here all the time. And what I see consistently, especially with children, is
Yes.
when they die, whether it's from a medical illness, a violent death, whatever it might be, they hang around a lot longer. They're really hanging around. They're really motivated. They're really, wanting to make sure somehow and give signs and messages to their family members that it's okay. I'm still here. I'm still around. It's just, in our human form, our brain can't wrap
Right.
around
And, and,
something
and,
that
and
we don't
I
know
think
from
that
the
for parents or for family, this is really what they want to know, which is this child
Yes,
okay? Are they okay?
yes. And I see it all the time that, you know, how do I say this? Every adult and child that comes to me who has transitioned, died, they're not all in the same place and space. So that's
Okay.
what's really interesting what I see. But what I feel and see consistently is, wow, what a difference, what a lightness,
Yes.
what insight that they have outside of here. And for like parents or loved ones, it's a great gift that I can give, but not
Yeah.
only just that they come through me, but here's the great part. I can put somebody on my table because I use a table as well, or they can be just sitting down, and I can open up portals in their body where they can go inside and now connect with their loved one and
Okay.
feel their loved one from beyond this realm so they can have closing conversations, connections, figure out how they can connect to each other while the one person is still alive in human form and their
Okay.
loved one has transitioned. That to me is so powerful because they're like, oh my gosh,
Sure.
now that I'm carrying them right here in my body and I know how to reach out and connect with them. That is so needed when
Oh,
we're
of
in human form,
course.
you
And I
know?
imagine also, Paige, part of that being able to connect has got to allow them to also to go on,
It,
because
absolutely. It's
they have to
oh,
stay here. They're still alive with a human
oh,
body. So
that's
this
the
allows
hardest.
them to, either if they have other children or just to go on with their
Yes,
lives.
yes.
And I think
And the,
sometimes people, and luckily I've not never been in that, and I don't ever want to be in that situation, but I think sometimes maybe a parent, or they kind of feel, oh, if I kind of move on, I'm betraying, or like I don't
I'll forget
love,
them.
I'm forgetting about what happened with my child, for
I hear
example, as
all
if
the
it's a
time.
child.
I hear all the time, Paige, if I laugh or if I move
Mm-hmm.
on, am I betraying? Am I forgetting them? And I said, no, not at all, because the messages I continually get is, keep moving on, mom, dad, husband, wife, child. Keep moving on. Take me with you. So when I get people to get connected to their loved one in their body, what I'll say to them is, okay, when you go do this next step, now you can say, honey, child, husband, whatever it might be, can you travel with me inside of my body to help me with this next piece? And the strength that they get and the messages that they get is so different. That doesn't mean that they don't have times in human form that they cry, that they
Of
miss,
course.
because we're still in flesh. So that
Sure.
happens. But let me tell you, it really makes a huge difference, like you said, of continuing on, knowing that, okay, they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came into this lifetime, I knew as a very small toddler that my role here was to help people realize that they're not alone. Because loneliness and being alone is one of the hardest things here, especially when you have trauma and people are, killed around you, or they die of a terrible death, or there's disease, whatever it might be. And even animals. Our animals are our family too.
Sure.
And that's another big, big component.
Oh yes, but I'm telling you.
My animals are my children, and
Oh my
I
God.
have fun at times, with other clients as well.
Yes, and I myself I had an experience a couple of days ago. I have right now 5 little dogs,
I know I
and
saw something moving
yeah,
behind
they
you.
they they sometimes they're back there and they
It's great.
and one of them we left in a hurry because we had forgotten something, and we have a front door that sometimes if you don't slam it right, bottom line, and we have a gated property.
Hmm.
And when we got back and we opened the gate to bring the car in, I saw one of them outside, and I was like, "Oh my God, okay." But then I couldn't find one of them, and we had been gone maybe a little bit. I was frantic.
Yes, of
Thinking I had
course.
lost one of them. I mean, we have
It's
a
your
big
baby.
property, and finally, I mean, I went around the property. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't. I rode even after like at midnight. I rode around, and I would go on the four-way stop signs calling her name. And I was, oh my God, it was so horrible. And I had already put ads on Craigslist on all the, and I went to
Oh,
sleep. Difficult, like, when your body just can't. And all of a sudden, I hear, it's like, I hear her barking. I was like, she's, by the way, a little dog. That's another thing. And I woke up, my husband next to me goes, "Where are you going?" She was at our front door. I don't know how she got out. I don't know how she got in at 2 in the
she
morning,
said, hello, I'm here. I'd like to come home
barking. And it was
now.
like that bark, I have children, but it's almost like your dog's bark.
Yes, yes,
I
I
still
do.
to this point don't quite understand how she got out and how she came back in. Okay,
She's
but
small.
back to the
She can
point of
fit.
yes, I'm one of these people that even our animals,
Mhm.
they become enmeshed in your emotional life where they mean a lot to you. Uh, and I mean, I've had pets die on me, and I understand it because I think that's something that we forget about sometimes when we get animals that not what 95% of the time we're going to outlive them
Yeah,
unless you got a parrot or a tortoise.
yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Can I share something about animals that's really important for signs and messages?
I believe it.
Okay, so in my book too, there's a chapter called Land and Its Messages, and I teach clients, patients, and in workshops that pay attention to the animals that keep showing up, whether they're winged animals, insects, lizards, big mammals, or they can either be alive or they can just be pictures or they keep
Okay.
showing up in shows because each animal has a message and a meaning, and it's really, really important. And when we're talking about health and being here in this world and dealing with death, whatever's going on in your life, certain animals show up at certain times for the situation that you're being challenged with to give you messages of hope or what to do. So always pay attention to that because it's so incredibly helpful.
It's not, in other words, there's no coincidences. There
Never,
is,
ever, ever, even when it comes to like, if tarantulas keep showing up, they're showing up because this is what a tarantula means and this is how it's
hmm
going on in your life. And yeah,
Right. And a lot of people don't realize also that also when it comes to symbology, it's not a one size fit all. And I've
right.
used this example. Let's
Absolutely.
say to one person, you show them a tiger and they're scared, and this is like a man-eating animal. You show a tiger to another person, and you think it's beautiful, it's powerful, it's sleek.
Mhm.
Everybody has a different interpretation. So, like what you said, what you're seeing is meant for you individually
At that time
at that
in your
time for you to
life.
interpret it according to, like what you said, what is going on with you,
Hmm.
whether you're conscious of it or subconsciously, because that's I'm a subconscious behaviorist, and I know that a lot of our behavior and our reaction to things is dictated by our subconscious mind. Like you said, based sometimes even on experiences we have that we might not even consciously remember, but we react to it in different ways throughout our lives, unless we come and, for lack of a better word, make peace with it, or you
Right.
know, I, I'm
And
not so much into
and
that closure word,
well,
but
if you're ever going to get full closure in human form, you
right.
may get some peace and ease about something. Um, and that's okay because we're always searching for this inner peace and joy. It's hard to get, when you're going through challenging times.
Well, of course. And let me ask you something, Paige, and
Yeah.
I've run
And
across
I'll
this
try and answer
sometimes,
it, Marlene.
where it comes to, and this is especially, I know this is really difficult for some people because I would say most of the times it's very painful. But I've noticed some people who were victimized at some time during their lifetime, either as a child or even as an adult, they don't want to deal with it. And because it's painful, it is. But I
Hmm.
find that when they don't, they're still being victimized. In other words, that memory might be just as fresh as it was 20 years before. So it still has like a central theme and colors their daily life. So, in other words, instead of it being something that happened to me, right or wrong, I accepted, I handled it, and I moved beyond it, they're constantly victimized. They're going through that. It's almost like on a loop kind of thing. And I don't know if you've ever had people come to you where
Always.
sometimes
Yeah,
they
I
might be
call
even older and they tell you, and then when you kind of like go through you find that the core of it is that's still, they're still reliving it, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I call it like the PTSD loop.
Yes.
It's that loop that goes on in the brain, in the medulla, that just loops and loops and loops and loops. So I work with that all the time, um, consistently, every single day, every
Yeah.
single day. I see that every single day. And remember, look at our world. We live in a time, and we have been, that's pretty violent.
Yes.
That's pretty scary. I look at the world as world before 9/11 and the world after 9/11.
Yes.
Because for me, things changed drastically after 9/11.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, it was. I mean, there was always precautions and you heard of certain things happening, but I want to say was kind of distant in a way. And it didn't color your daily living as much as it did after that. And like I was telling you before, there was my kids were in high school. This is the first time. I mean, they had my emergency numbers in the office, but this was the first time I made a plan with my kids. If something happens, we had a plan, a meeting point, where to do, where to go, stay here. And before that, 9/11, I never had to experience or go through that, or tell my kids this is where we're going to meet. It's like, but yeah, I mean, and it's evolved from there. It's taken on different, things where, and in some points, it almost becomes a little bit surreal.
Hmm.
And I think that sometimes
Well, we're
people,
desensitized because we see
yes,
violence on TV, video games. We're constantly hearing things from the news. Um, I remember working at the Pentagon, and there was certain places within the Pentagon that the war that was in and still is in the Middle East,
hmm,
when they would do warfare, we'd have these younger adults pushing buttons, sending, missiles over there. And to them, it was just like playing a video game. There was no
sure,
connection to a missile over to life that is over there because they've been so desensitized from playing video games all their life. So
yeah,
we take a look at, what TV, movies, the news, video games has played a part in all of our lives. And even though
right,
we've become desensitized, every single time you watch or hear something like that, the body takes it in their fluids, the organs, the musculoskeletal system. it still creates a level of unease and on the spectrum of trauma in your body each time you take something like that in.
Yes, and it's like you said, in the game you hit reset and everybody gets back up and you just
Yeah,
redo it again. There's no permanency as far as or the value of human life, even if it is one life or various.
right.
I mean, it's and and I don't know, and like you said, maybe it's because the video games or the amount of time. And I'm going to go back to the good old days. I remember watching what would be considered politically incorrect cartoons when I was a kid, like Johnny Quest, where,
Oh,
you saw.
that's remember Johnny Quest. Yeah,
But you know what? I always did used to distinguish. Plus, let's say I would just watch that Saturday morning, and after that, I would get up and go outside and play.
yeah.
So I wasn't constantly bombarded
Hmm.
by this. It was like it was a cartoon, it was an adventure, but I knew that that was not real. Uh, and but the rest of my time playing, that was not what I was doing. And I think, like you said, because let's face it, it's very engaging if you get into it. Plus, you're in the air conditioning and you've got food, and you just hang out with your friends. Or in some cases, I know a lot of people even develop relationships with other players if they're on one of these platforms where people from around the world can go in and play at the same time. I've seen where um, this is more real to them than their real
In life.
lives.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's a good escapism.
it is. And there's nothing wrong with escapism. And, I've found, some, like I tell somebody, it's okay to self-soothe. You know that thing how they say women, you know, we go shopping and everybody does it for a little while. It's okay. Distract yourself, go to the
Right.
movies, go shopping, whatever. And then you kind of like come back and you're like, okay, now let me see if I can handle what's going on. It's, some type of stressful situation that's going to happen. If you're alive and you got a pulse, it's going to counter stress somewhere along. But it's when all of a sudden you're de-stressing or distracting yourself continuously,
Right.
okay?
That's
And
the
real
issue.
life and all the things that come with real life are like, I won't think about that now. I'll go play.
Right. Right. Right.
And then
Everybody
what you're
likes a little
playing
bit of
is what you said,
distraction.
what you bring into your mind and into your
Your
system,
body.
to your organic system.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree that the phenomena that we're experiencing now has a lot of roots that if you follow them back, the final product is what we're seeing now. Um, and like we were discussing, especially if you're talking an individual has some type of mental illness or behavior disorder that sometimes they can't distinguish too well with reality. Maybe because in this case, like we were talking about the shooter, his behavior was so weird that he kind of alienated his classmates. So that isolation. So I mean, and it unfortunately snowballs from there. But I think all those components sometimes the final result is not good. And like I said, even um, that isolationism where sometimes the relationships you develop via the character that you've created is more real to you than going out, which I think is a big problem, and actually engaging with other human beings around you, even if
Right.
sometimes they're unpleasant. It's like, hello, this is life. Of course you're going to run across people, and you learn how to deal with it without wanting to kill them, I guess is what I'm saying. you know, it's like, oh, that jerk, okay, and then you walk on. It's like it doesn't mean you're going to like everybody or get along with them. You're going to run across people they're unlikable, or they say something or do something that you don't like. But then there's like a medium point between, yeah, you get angry and then you go on your way. That's it.
And
You
that's
don't want to
why,
take them out.
yeah, and that's why when we're having issues and we're coming up against what we consider a challenging situation with certain individuals, I try really hard myself, and I teach people this as well, as when you're having a really tough time, look through the person into their heart center and notice that they are a walking soul and spirit just like you are. They're showing up differently in human form because they have their journey, and they're doing what they need to do at this time. And if you take a moment and really start to
Yes.
look at someone at the heart center and start to look at them as a soul, you can say, hey, you know what? I've shown up like that too, because guess what? Everyone's a mirror back to us. So if you can look at them and go, okay, they are soul and spirit just like I am. I've had days where I've acted like that, or you're mirroring back to
Yes.
me. It makes a little bit difference of how you respond to that person or how you walk away from that person.
Exactly.
And that's a big component. It's challenging to do sometimes, but if you can get into that pattern of looking at people that way and going, okay, they're holding a mirror up to me. What am I supposed to learn from this?
Exactly.
And or, okay, they're soul and spirit too. I've acted like that too, because not any one of us
Of
is
course.
perfect all the time. So just a little tidbit and a suggestion for your listeners to kind of
Right.
start to play.
And I think also, and I don't know if you've run across it, people that seem to be always angry. Their level is always angry mode. So of course it doesn't take much to get them to react. Not even a chip on their shoulder. They're just angry all the time. So, somebody cuts in front of them in traffic, they go off. Somebody takes their parking space, they go off. Whatever. They're always, and I don't know. I know in some cases some people use it as a self-defense mechanism. At one time it served a purpose and they kept that angry persona. And I usually see it as, tell me how angry you are and I'll tell you how scared you are. But unfortunately the repercussions of it are that 9 times out of 10, you always have more confrontations. You're unhappy, very unhappy, because nothing fulfills you. I think it's really difficult to be angry and happy at the same time.
Well, they can't take up the same space. They can't
Yeah,
live in the same space. And for anger, you have to remember, wow, because anger is not an emotion that can sit by itself. It's always fueled by something else, whether it's betrayal, sadness, hurt, disappointment. And if that has continued in their life, it's easier for them to go to the anger place than it is to actually feel what's underneath
yes,
that anger. And that happens so many times. So many times. So a lot of times when someone's completely angry or, like you said, cuts you off, throws you the finger, whatever it
yeah,
might be, again, step back and go, wow, what happened in their day before they saw me? What happened with this? And
yeah,
that's why there's just random acts of being kind. I remember, do you remember when the toll booths, you had to put change in them and stuff like
sure,
that, and now you just use the card?
yeah,
I always have told people, look, pay for the person behind you, whether you use it on your credit card or whatever. It's $4, $2, whatever it might be. That thing
yeah,
changes someone's
exactly.
day. If you're in the grocery store and someone's really angry, offer to, hey, can I help you with this? Or
Yes,
whatever it is, doing something, if you're in a good mood, spread that. Because you
yes,
never know. You don't know if that person just lost someone, if they're dealing with a medical illness. You don't know. Did they just lose their house? Like, you don't know what's going on in that person's life. It's so
yes,
easy to throw curse words back at them, but it takes a lot to stop and go, wow, there must be something really going on with them. Maybe you can do something really small, and maybe that person won't appreciate it in the moment, but you don't know how you've affected or planted a seed moving on. Sometimes we just don't know.
yes, exactly. Like you said, I mean, yeah, sometimes appearances, they can be deceiving.
Mm-hmm.
You could see it, and I'm going to go with men, especially men that sometimes have a difficulty expressing,
They use anger more
sorrow.
easier.
Uh, and you see them and they look like they don't care or anything, and you really don't know what's going on inside of them as far as why they're acting angry. It's just because maybe they just have a hard time accepting sorrow or feeling it, in other words, and they think they just don't know how to handle it. So, like you said, you really don't know what's going on inside of them, that an act of kindness could make a difference for them.
Whether it's man or woman,
Hmm.
just try and always remember, because we've always been in those places too, where we've been angry, we've been disappointed, and that's blasted out towards towards someone else in some way, shape, or form.
So, Paige, let me ask you something. Let's say when somebody comes to you, and by this, and you tell me, and I don't know, sometimes I find that we kind of live in an instant gratification where people want instant relief, instant results. And sometimes I find that, especially when you're talking whether it's physical trauma, sometimes, many times as emotional trauma or something. That's a process, I'm not going to say years, but sometimes I've noticed that the getting better, it doesn't, it's not like a clap of thunder. Sometimes you feel something, but then it takes days and sometimes weeks for it to like start shifting inside of you. Where maybe if, let's say you were hopeless before, now you start feeling hopeful. Whereas before, you were angry. All of a sudden, the things that used to make you angry don't make you angry anymore. So I don't know if you could talk about that as far as what's the process of when somebody comes to you for help? What happens with that?
Well, that's a loaded question because I'm such an anomaly. I use so many different kinds of things, and people can either come and see me face to face, they can do retreats, or virtual, because I have so many different things that I can do virtually with someone. Again, I go into the body a lot because the body holds the story. So if you have a story that you've been looping around in your brain, where are you holding it in your body? Like we talked about anger. Where is anger being held in the body? What organ is it connected to? In Chinese medicine, each organ has emotions, and in a Chinese medicine clock for 24 hours a day, there's certain times a day that are connected to different organs. For instance, sleep is a big thing. A lot of people don't sleep well. So if you're getting up between 1 o'clock and 3, that's the liver. When the liver is about detoxifying, our food, our fluids, but it's our emotions as well too.
Right.
So if you're having a tough time detoxifying what's going on, our emotions coming up and you're not being able to process them. So I use a combination of Chinese medicine, organs, chakra work, the emotions, the body telling the story, and what type of physical ailments have you had? Each one of us carries our emotions differently. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, you know what, I'm always having intestinal issues, chronic diarrhea or constipation, IBS, whatever it might be, well, that's the first and second chakra, and that's a lot has to do with, how grounded are you in the world? Where do you believe you fit in the world? Mm-hmm. What's your stability level in your world? Your sexuality, do you have, past sexual assault, sexual abuse types of issues, inappropriate touching? So anything that's gone on, the body's taking the hit, and it's holding in your fluids, your organs. So when I start to work on that area and get my clients and patients connected to the organs, I can actually get them connected inside their body to their organs, but the organs are going to tell the story, and then they get to release it. And then things are much more calm, much more open, and then they get to find out what do they need to take care of in that section of their body as they move forward. So in the body, will tell you what it wants you to do, how it wants you to do it, how it wants you to eat, what different mantras. The body gives you information. Okay. We live in a world where we have our brains tell the body, all right, you're going to eat this, you're going to do this, this is how hard you're going to do it, you're going to keep pushing, and we never let the body say, excuse me, that doesn't work for me until we have a physical injury, an illness, chronic situation go on, and then all of a sudden it gets our attention, hopefully. And then when it gets our attention, then we focus on just the medical. And in my book, I talk about working and training with medical doctors of all kinds, of how that's just one piece, the physical situation that's coming up. What's the story that the physical disease or injury is holding that you need to pay attention to help release it? And or maybe part of your journey here in this lifetime is to learn how to deal with medical issues. Everybody has different journeys and paths that they've taken on when they come into this lifetime. So it's very, it's individual, it's very complex, but at the same time, what I do is so simple and so easy, because I find in a complex world, the body and how we're dealing with things can be done in a very simple, easy manner that I can give someone that they can practice on their own, give them some homework, that they start to become more empowered by. I know
which is what you want people, the person to become empowered, that they could, that at some point they're going to go on by their own and take care of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you seen, I've seen continuously, and I talk to other practitioners in the wellness field, we've gotten so good at having practitioners tell us what's wrong, that we don't own what's wrong and be a part of the collaboration of being connected to our bodies to bring information in of, This is what's going on in my body. Those pills or supplements that you wanted me to take, I already know that's not going to work for me because I'm connected to my body. Like we want somebody else telling us how, when, what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And not that we can't guide and assist, but you have to take ownership of this flesh that you came in with and start to step into it so you can be collaborative for your own health and an advocate for yourself.
And let me ask, because it sounds also, and I don't know if you've ever done anything called parts therapy, which is, usually has to do with your aura. And, when people, their aura gets holes in them or thins out,
Yes.
sometimes because of trauma, sometimes if you got some type of addiction or had some type of addiction,
And it could be just environmental as well.
Yeah, it could be a lot of different things that'll affect your aura. As far as to protect you, that's kind of like.
Yes.
Let me ask you, it sounds almost, have you ever, when a person, let's say, have you ever found that any of what's affecting them in their body, that it actually sometimes takes on that it looks like something, whether it's a black mass or sometimes has even has a certain look about it, or the person's personalized it to look as a certain way. Like I've heard of some people saying, well, you know what? If you ask them what does it look like, they'll say, well, it feels like something dark, or it feels like a
Yes.
black ball or whatever. It's not really a black ball in the sense but that's how they see it in their auric body. And I don't know, do you see that, or have you had people describe it when they finally get to that point where you find it in their body?
All the time. And when you're really connected, what they see is generally truth of what's going on in the body. They can describe the texture, the color, the size. And then, of course, we have conversations. So if there's a mass in there, the mass will talk back. I teach them how to do that.
Yes.
The mass will talk back and say, this is why I'm here. These are the reasons why. This is what I need you to do. This is what I don't need you to do. Again, it's becoming fully connected to what you've already been connected with when you first came into this lifetime.
Right.
You have a knowing and an inner wisdom as soon as you came into this lifetime, but no one has taught you how to connect fully to that inner knowing and wisdom. Like people talk about mindfulness, which is fantastic. What I do goes leaps and bounds beyond mindfulness. Where
Yes.
It's going into everything and really taking full ownership. And, like I said before, because illnesses and viruses, boy, they're coming in stronger and stronger. I do a lot of work with neurotoxin illnesses, whether it's mold or Lyme or Epstein-Barr, because that's really embedding in people's bodies and just bringing their quality of life down horribly.
Yes. I the other day, I had to go to an emergency room, not for myself, but for somebody else.
Uh-huh.
And, because now we've got this thing going on with the flu. And it's the first time I walk in, the personnel, that take your information, or if you're trying to find somebody's room, they all had surgical masks on. And I was like, okay. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm putting on the Purell. And it was like, wow, you understand that when you're going to an emergency room, there's people there with different types of illnesses or sickness. Some of them are contagious, some of them are not. Some of them are contagious and don't know it. But you never kind of like wig out the way all of a sudden it was like, why is everybody behind this desk sitting on with a surgical, one of these things over their mouths and their noses? It was like, now I'm looking around and it was like, okay, I just see people that are sick, and I guess maybe being all the time inside a hospital, but that's the first time I had seen that, where it kind of like wigged me out a little bit, like, okay. And I understand that I don't want to understate the severity of, let's say, all these people that have died recently of the flu. But sometimes people don't realize that there's certain sicknesses, not like before, let's say when there was the Spanish influenza at the turn of the century where millions died around the world, but that, people can die, of the flu. And they have been dying sometimes because their immune system's compromised, or they were old, infirm, very young. And sometimes I know the media has a little bit to do with that as well, as far as kind of like making us ultra aware, or in some cases ultra scared of what's been around us all the time, which is that because our bodies, we're still susceptible to sickness.
Yeah, and that's a good message about going back to the challenges that are going on in this world and how much fear consistently comes out that we always hear
Yes.
about. Fear, 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 and that embeds in the body. And we become a society that's much more fearful, much
Yes.
more protective. And when there's fear, there's a difficult time having love and trust. So we
Yes.
battle that here, and that fear again, we capture it inside of our organs, inside of our fluids, and it creates illness, injuries, disease, chronic situations on top of our
Yes.
daily life of stress
Yes.
that we
And
go through.
and sometimes, I my ability to watch TV sometimes it's so I watch certain things where I don't see that many commercials like Netflix or whatever. But
Right,
even when I
right.
do, I'm like, how many commercials are we going to get about different pharmaceutical drugs
Yeah,
or treatment for cancers? What is this? Yeah, it was like it's you continuously get bombarded by these messages, and I'm thinking to myself, and sometimes I call it what's called the industry of fear, where there's a
mhm,
lot of people making a lot of money from keeping
mhm.
a lot of people really scared all the time about everything. It feels like sometimes it's almost everything. And I agree with you. Sometimes um, we have this uh, dialogue almost in the back because, let's face it, we're exposed to it in so many ways all the time where we
Yes,
develop this fear living,
yes,
of living.
yes.
Everything, whether it's something you eat, some place you go, like when I went to the emergency room, uh, and I guess it's okay to tell people, you shouldn't eat this. Let's say cigarettes are bad for you. Great. Or certain things, yes, you should notify people, don't do this or don't eat this, don't ingest this, don't go there because it's bad for you. But when you continuously, I think, get bombarded from all sides every day, all of a sudden you walk around, even if you're not aware of it, of being scared of living life. And I think it impairs your enjoyment of life on a day to day basis. Um, that doesn't mean I know that some people get very sick or that things happen, but there's a lot of us that, unless, you gotta, and that's another thing. A lot of people sometimes they don't know how to live on a daily basis because the the daily life it's always full of pitfalls because they're given all this information all the time. And I think at some point, depending on your personality, not everybody's the same. A lot of people take it in more and they put it into their psyche, their being, and in some cases, comes out some other way. Especially if you're just a little bit of a hypochondriac, the type, where they're more likely to buy into all the things that can happen to you, for example, health wise. So, yeah, I think that a lot of times, for all the benefits of technology, this is one of the downsides where, um, especially here, like in the United States, where everybody's got a TV, and you can get bombarded by just messaging that's not really to our benefit in the end. It's not. And it shows up. I think it shows up in a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
let me ask you something. When somebody, let's say somebody comes to you, I know that you've worked with people that have had PTSD, like they've gone to war, okay, and they
Hmm.
come back. And I imagine, do you ever get people that they don't want to spend the rest of their lives taking medicine? In other words, they don't want to take pills anymore.
Yes.
They just want to learn how to deal with it. How do you handle people that come like that? That, hey, I don't want to spend the rest of my life popping a pill to address
I
this
say
problem.
bravo to you, I say bravo to you so we can get underneath, the real truth of what the body's holding and the story and stories that you've been holding. But I go back to what I said in the beginning that I'm all about integration. There's a place in the space for Western and Eastern.
Hmm.
So sometimes you need that pill to get you over a hump and then you can wean. There's also so many different kinds of supplements, and I do a lot of integrative, holistic, and complementary type of modalities that really help people, even if they are taking different types of meds. So again, it's individual, it's integration, but taking a pill and not dealing with what's going on, with the root of what's going
Right.
on, never get you moving forward in the most healthiest and highest good for yourself.
Right. And I've had, as a hypnotherapist, I've had on occasion people mistakenly thinking that I can erase a memory. Can you hypnotize me so that I don't remember that?
Oh, interesting.
And it's, no, I can't.
Interesting.
Oh, no, no. Some of the things I've heard of, which is like, can you hypnotize my wife back to like, she'll feel for me like we did at the beginning. It's like, no. But anyway, my point is that
Interesting.
you also, I imagine it's not a question of forgetting. It's a question of understanding what happened to you, not forgetting it.
What I always say, whether you have PTSD from war, sexual assault, a death, a car accident, or you're going through cancer, you can fight, but the word and the movement that you're missing is embrace. You cannot keep fighting something without embracing what it is that you have. You know, I see a lot of cancer patients, and for them it's, fight, you're a warrior. You are a warrior. But at the same time, you also have to embrace the story that's inside of you, because it's here for a reason, to give you information. So again, when you fight and embrace all at the same time, you change the dynamic of what is going on with you and the disease or the story or the trauma that you have.
And Paige, can you give any example, without, of course, breaking confidentiality, of any of your cases where somebody has come to you, for lack of a better word, at the 11th hour, okay, because they're ready to, maybe they're at their worst, whether it's psychologically and or physically, spiritually, and then after working with you, they're able to turn things around, maybe beyond their own expectations?
Well, I call it the window of trauma.
Okay.
People have known that they're not doing well, but until their life starts to really fall apart in every area and they're about to lose things, it's the window of trauma that they will do absolutely anything to get better. And you've heard of that.
Yes.
Absolutely anything. It's like a sheer panic. But a lot of times I caution people with that sheer panic, because you can be impulsive with it, but it's about being consistent with your life. Do you want to just come in and just boom, okay, one session, I'm done? And yes, you will feel a little bit better, but you got to get to roots of different things, and get some tools under your belt in a different way. Because again, what I do is so different. But it's that window of trauma. If you think you're going to come in and in one day or 90 minutes, things are going to be completely better and you're done, it's not realistic.
Exactly.
Because how many years and how long have you been carrying what you're carrying? And if I'm going to work with the body and we're going to work with different things, it's going to take a little bit of time. Now, my work does move much quicker than most because of the different things that I do. But and I've worked a lot with first responders for years, fire, police, military, and in the world of fire and EMS, we call them frequent flyers in the ER, where they're constantly coming in. It's the same thing. It's the same story.
Exactly.
And that's what they're used to. And we all get frequent flyers sometimes. And by the time someone reaches me, they want to do the work in every single way. They want to do this advanced work, and they want to get connected beyond this earthly realm, and they want to know more, and they want to step deeper into it, and they want to be more empowered, and they want to step into their knowing more and be a little bit more intuitive and work with the trauma that they have. When someone comes to me, you want to do the work and the commitment. I don't deal with frequent flyers.
Right, exactly.
Because of the level of how I work.
And have you ever had the situation where somebody comes in for what's apparently, let's say, whatever, a trauma of something, and then when you work with them, you realize that underneath that there's other things, or another event, or another experience?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, they might come in and say, well, this happened to me, whatever, a year ago. And then when you start working with them, you go, okay, and you realize there's more underneath it. It's almost like another layer.
Yeah, there's always layers, but what I find is all of the layers, you could have lots of different traumas and situations, but what we're looking for is what is the themes, because the theme is what carries you through. So you can have all these different traumas, but it's, what's the theme behind all those traumas? And I'm a big believer, and I've seen it in my own life and with my clients and patients and where I've deployed and where I've been, is that with trauma and all of the different layers and all of the accumulations kind of that, go on with trauma, that you don't need to keep reliving it and have somebody talk about it, and every single piece, the body already has the story.
Right.
You keep having them talk about it over and over again or having them relive it, you're just perpetuating the fight, flight, freeze response. I don't do that because I don't need to do that. That's another reason why I have people come to see me, because they don't have to relive what they've already gone through. It's a very different process.
Do you find in some cases where people, like you said, once you start going into a little bit more of what's going on with them, that there's also a pattern of repetition, basically driving these experiences that end up in some type of trauma for them? In other words, they kind of like keep stumbling over the same. They want to make it right, but they're just going about it the wrong way.
Absolutely. It's kind of like life. If we don't deal with something, the universe sends us the same message. Could look a different way, but we still get the same message. We still don't get it. They'll send it again a little bit harder this time, and they'll keep sending it until it's more intense, until we finally say, Uncle, okay, yes, I'm going to have to deal with this. Or someone goes, I'm not dealing with this, and I'm just going to drink or gamble or have risky behavior or whatever it might be. But the universe always gets our attention for our highest good.
Yes. Yes, it's almost like, and you would think, well, why would somebody put themselves either in a situation or in contact with a person that's going to repeat a very unpleasant or traumatic experience?
Because that's what they're familiar with,
exactly.
And that's what they're...
Exactly. In their logic mind, they'll say, no, never again. I won't. Forget it.
We have to learn the flags, and sometimes these flags or situations are very insidious, and they're not as clear. So if you're not as connected...
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up. Sometimes they start out very, very subtly.
Yes. Yes.
Some people think that it's in your face, and sometimes it starts very subtly, and then as it progresses, whether it's a relationship or whatever, all of a sudden you're neck deep, right in a very similar to what happened to you before, whatever it is, whatever the situation is. And you can ask yourself, and I've seen it, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And it's like, okay, there's something there that you're not wanting to either accept, deal with, look at. I mean,
you have to remember too, there's also different levels of layers.
Yes.
So maybe the same situation comes up, but it comes up in a different way because you're ready to look at it from a different layer. So again, it's so individual.
Yes, right. And that's what a lot of people sometimes, and I think a lot of people, like you said, sometimes they want the magic pill. But I think when it comes to stuff like that, when it's something a little bit deeper in your psyche or something that's really causing a problem, that one size fit all or reading a book is not going to quite cut it, as far as that you're going to need help. Let's say like coming to see you, somebody like you, okay, because, well, maybe it worked for your friend or for that person that you saw on TV, might not be exactly work for you because it's your own individual, what's a result of all your experiences, nuances. Like I said, you get two people that undergo the same experience. One deals with it and the other one doesn't, even if they appear to do so, because we're a product of, God, it could be genetics, environment, everything that basically that we take in from the moment that we're able to, that even though we're not conscious of it. So we're very individualized, I think, as far as when it gets to that point where you can't, that's affecting your life. Let me ask you something, Paige. Is there an age group where you say there's an accumulation of either results where people say, that's it, I give up, like you said, Uncle, and they come to see you? Or is it older people, middle age? When is it that you see most people say, I realize that there's something here I'm not getting and I need help?
All the above. I mean,
Okay.
it's it, it's all the above. What's funny though is when I have someone come to see me that's in their 60s or 70s, what they'll say is, "For gosh sakes, holy crap, have I not gotten this yet?" And I'm like, you know what? It's okay. I don't think we ever fully get it until we transition from this lifetime completely, because we're
Right.
always going to be in this human flesh form. And then we laugh about it, and then we jump into whatever it is that the
Okay.
body needs to share. So
But
yeah,
you also, and I'm glad also that it's no such thing. It's never too late. If you're
never
50s,
ever.
60s, 70s, whatever, and you realize this is it, this is when you got your epiphany, that it's never too late.
Yeah.
It's not like, I'm too old for this. No, not really.
No, because a lot of times too, as people get older and they're getting closer to their own transition from this
Hmm.
world, they really want to understand things more. And then they reach out to me too to understand more about what goes on after they leave this world. Because they read my book and they're like, oh my gosh, can we talk about this? Because they have their own fears.
Right.
Even they can be just as religious and spiritual and faith-based, but the human mind will go, oh, I'm still a little nervous. How do I
Sure.
really know what goes on? So it helps them kind of step into their spirituality or their faith, whatever it is, so they can kind of be able to embrace a little bit more that you're just leaving this world. There's so
Exactly.
many other things and places and spaces that you're going to go to outside of this realm.
Exactly. And I think that it also helps when somebody comes to an expert, which is you're an expert in this. In other words, that you kind of like reassure them it's not a fairy tale. There is who you are, your awareness exists beyond once your body is dead. But you're
Oh,
not
and
going to
can
need
I
it anyway.
Yeah, and can I say something there?
Sure.
I'm so glad you brought that up and said this because Newsweek, and I'm going to have this on my website. Newsweek came out with an article earlier this month, that talks about they have found now that there is consciousness after the physical body dies. And I've been saying this for decades.
Yes.
So it was a great validation to what I wrote in my book and to how I work with clients to say that, hey, we are not the flesh. We're just
Hmm.
borrowing this wonderful human fleshness
Right.
to kind of live this experience, but we keep going on long after this.
Right. And I think that most people sometimes, like you said, especially when they're getting towards the end of their lives for whatever reason, whether it's their health or their age,
Right,
that
right. Good point. Health
that they
too.
start thinking, that's it. Is that all there is to me? That's it. It'll be like finito, like the dirt nap forever and ever, and that's the end of
Just
me.
dirt.
And and to think, okay, no, once your body dies, which is what you need to exist on the earth plane, you
Right,
won't need it where you're going, but that doesn't mean that's the end of you. It's just that
right,
the skin suit doesn't serve a purpose anymore where you're going. And a lot of
right.
people, unfortunately, and it's hard. And I know we're bound to our bodies, but a lot of people sometimes it's hard for them to think that they exist beyond this. This
Right.
is me.
That's yeah, and that's why I get
Yeah.
people connected to their portals and to their spirit and to their soul. And in my book, I give examples of what I've been shown that when someone goes through a horrible car accident or a murder, or their loved one thinks they died in pain, what I have seen is something completely different that happens when you're going through a horrific death. So it's actually much better than you can imagine. And it puts people's minds at ease because we always think the worst. Oh my God, they suffered, they
The
did this.
suffering, yes.
No, this is what really happens. And I talk about in that book what really happens with the soul and the human body when it appears to be a horrific death.
Right. I think that there is a point where, despite, and like you said, the ones that are left behind, where you're thinking that this person is agonizing through the whole experience, and I think there's a point where the awareness of who that person is kind of like goes into more like an observer mode, as far as maybe they are able to witness it, but there's sometimes it's not necessarily this horrific, minute by minute, second by second, uh, that people envision, that people feel when they die. Like you said, some
I've
type
been
of
shown that the soul gets pulled out and they don't have the physical pain or the emotional
right,
pain when this is going on. And I talk about that and give examples of how that occurred in my book as well.
which is fantastic. So, Paige, let me ask you, what is your website if anybody wants to go and visit and see your books or make an appointment with you?
Oh, okay. Of course, it's a long website name because it's my name. If I'd had an easier name, it would have been a lot easier, Marlene. So it's paigevaldiseri.com, and it's PaigeValdiseri.com. And I know that you'll have this link, so if you didn't
Yes,
catch it,
I am going to have the link
yeah,
at the
yeah,
bottom for
yeah,
anybody, but this is in case somebody's also just listening to it, they can find it. You also have, your book out. Um,
yeah. And the book is, and I know that you are visual, so I'll see the book, but it's called The Red Bag, Connecting the Journey of Healing Through Life, Death, and Beyond.
okay,
And you can get that on Amazon,
okay.
or you can get signed special copies from me. You can go to redbagpress.com and
Whoa.
you can see snippets of the book, interviews with the book, feedback from the book, both there and Amazon. So you can either order the book from Amazon or Kindle or Smashwords, or you can go to redbagpress.com and get a personalized copy. And when I say personalized, I don't just sign my name. I actually write. I tune into what the person's going through in their life, and I actually write. I take the time to write like a good paragraph to them.
Wow, that is
Yeah,
fantastic. That's great. That's definitely,
yeah.
oh yeah. I mean, sometimes people stand in lines when they want to get just a signature on a book.
No, I write more than that. I write more because I really believe if someone's going to take the time to pay for a personalized copy, I'm going to take the time to really write something in there rather than just my name.
Absolutely. Well, that's
Yeah.
great. Paige, it has been wonderful to have you on. I want
Yeah,
to thank you
thank you,
so much for
Marlene. I
spending this time.
enjoyed
It was
talking
great
with
to
you.
talk to you. And I'm so glad because I think that the future of medicine, of healthy human beings, is what you're describing. It's an integrative approach where
Yeah,
not only is it the body, but the psyche or the soul, the mind, everything. You can't include one and exclude the other. If we want to
right.
have healthy human beings, happy human beings, very important. Happy. I'm
Yeah,
into the happiness thing.
that's good. That's great, Marlene.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marlene.
Bye bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. I love talking to Paige. Of course, I love talking to everybody, but no, all kidding aside. You know what? When, and I know that, you know, I'm, the show won't be released for a little bit, but, you know, here in South Florida, we experienced the shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School. 17 people were killed, 14 of them kids. Um, and the worst part of it is that, like what we were talking about, sometimes, let's say you are going or doing something that you know something could happen to you. If you're a police officer, if your window washer. I mean, there's certain things that you always have in the back of your mind that something could happen to you. You don't want it to happen and you take precautions. But when you think of going to work, if you're an employee at a school, or you're a child or you're a parent sending your child to school, okay, um, this is the stuff that so many millions of Americans do every day without thinking twice that something like that is going to happen to them and change and shatter their lives because there's no other way to think about it. Okay. Even the students that survive. As a matter of fact, now in these few days is when they're starting to come back to school, and I don't know how they're handling that. Um, you know what? This is what's happened this is like a time capsule right now that happens. And of course it got national attention, my point being. But there's other things that happen to people individually throughout their lives that can be just as shattering. It doesn't make the news, okay? It doesn't get all this what's going on, but it's just as devastating to people. And I wasn't kidding when I said that I truly think that some people naturally or whatever, they know how to handle it. They process it, they grieve, whatever the situation involves. But there's a lot of us that get stuck. They can't get around it, they can't go beyond it, they can't progress. Sometimes it's something that happened to them personally. Sometimes it's something that happened to somebody they loved. And it's like all of a sudden life keeps moving and they don't seem to be moving. And maybe at the beginning when something is fresh, uh, you got to give yourself time. But there's at some point that you should be rejoining life. Changed, but some of these things, you're never going to be back to the way you were before, but that doesn't mean that you're stuck. And I think that the approach or the methods that Paige is talking about is something that we need to see as the norm of how we treat human beings when they find themselves either trauma, emotional or physical trauma as a child. Maybe it's a one-time thing that happened to you. It could be something systematic, which means it happened various times. Adult, child, one-time, war. God, we're human beings. Like I said, you have the same situation, two people, one handles it really well, the other one just doesn't. We're all different. But because of that individuality, I'm hoping that in the future, besides Western medicine, which deals strictly with having the body survive, that this will become very, very accepted. And I know I'm reaching out here. They will even have insurance plans that will cover the cost of not only traditional psychotherapy, okay? And by this, I don't mean that you don't need to have a mental or behavior disorder to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm talking as this is part of integration of exactly what she said, that a lot of times we take this grief or this anger or whatever it is and we integrate it into different parts of our body and it shows up in certain ways. And we need to get to the point where if that person needs it, that they have access to it and it's an accepted form of, how can I say, giving us good health in all. Because a lot of times we think that, if it's not a pill or something like a shot, it's like, oh, well, but we're more than that. We're more than just our bodies. We are. I mean, you could fix somebody up physically, patch them up, and they're fat. But if their psyche, if their brain, if their emotions are not, yeah, you have a very unhappy and sometimes unhealthy person emotionally and a body that's perfectly healthy. And the quality of their life is not good. And sometimes then, of course, and what happens is that person might develop other physical symptoms throughout the years because that trauma or that something that they witness. Sometimes, believe it or not, you can, and by this, believe me, I am not into victimology. No, victims are unhappy people. There is no happiness, no joy in being a victim, folks. None whatsoever. However, there's moments when things happen to us that you don't want to be victimized by it so that you can move on. Being in a state of victimhood, forget that. But what I'm going to say is, like I said, how everybody's individual. You'll have somebody that sometimes things don't have to happen to you directly. Okay, you could be a witness to something and get victimized for it because fortunately or unfortunately, depends on how you want to look at it, us humans have this great ability to imagine how easily that could have been us. Or fear that someone that we love, they could have, we kind of like take it, we own it. Okay, and sometimes it's really horrific things that just witnessing it. In other words, you need that help to snap you out of it. Like, yes, that happens, that can happen, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen to you or to somebody that you love or somebody that's close to you. All right. Another thing, and I'm going to have a show about that, what I call the industry of fear. I think we're force fed a lot through the media, but all these catastrophic things that can happen to us. Okay. Just living. And I'm going to give you this thing that happened with the school, that is horrible. It's horrific. But the truth is, the chances of that happening to us individually is very slight. Not one time more is it acceptable, by the way. By this, I don't mean it's okay. It is not okay. And that it should be addressed. Absolutely. But that the rest of, I'm going to use the United States, of us Americans, thinking day in and day out, where all of a sudden you're getting victimized by this mindset. What if I send my kid off to school and they're going to die and somebody's going to have and all of a sudden your life is, and then you watch all these commercials of all these medicines or diseases or illnesses, and all of a sudden we're getting bombarded with all these messages of all the things that can happen to us, all the bad things that can happen to us, either happen to us, illnesses, and you know what? That's bad for us. That's bad for us because whenever human beings live in a constant state of fear, even if it's in the back of your mind, it hurts you. It impinges on the quality of your life. It's much more difficult to be happy because even when you're happy, you're waiting for that other shoe to drop. As in all these things that I see every day that could happen to me. Okay, or you'll get the people that think that they don't deserve to be happy. Oh my God, all these horrible things happen. All these other people suffering. Why am I so lucky that nothing's happened to me? Yeah, there's people out there. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's got their own path. Okay, sometimes things happen to people without them bringing it on themselves, for lack of a better word. Sometimes things happen to people because they put themselves in a situation or in a location where it was more likely. But we should never feel guilty for being happy, especially if you're living your life on a day-to-day basis. Very important, folks. Take it day-to-day, okay? And I think at the end, and I've said this before, I think in the end what we all want is just to be happy, okay? I'm not going to say that we walk around going, ha ha ha, I'm so happy, it's great. But that we're content and that we're happy. And when you're like that, whenever you get the dips or the bad things that happen, and sometimes it doesn't have to be really bad. It could just be things that are annoying, stressful, things that happen. We're able to better cope with them, okay? When you're in the happy mindset or content mindset or hopeful mindset, when things happen from little to inconvenient to whoa, your approach to it is more realistic, as in maybe at the beginning you'll go, okay, but then you're better able to cope and find solutions or see the light at the end of the tunnel. However, if you are living already in fear, in distrust, in anger, in hopelessness, whenever you get the inconvenience to whatever, it's overwhelming. Even the smallest inconvenience becomes huge. And if it's really something, a stressful, big, giant problem, it can seem insurmountable. And that's why I'm saying that we should all strive, and by the mean, I don't mean Pollyanna, okay, to look at the positive spin of things, to take our lives in segments of 24 hours. Because the truth is, last time I checked, time travel is not possible. You can't change what's happened in the past. Okay? Worrying about the future doesn't change it. We worry about a lot of things that never come to pass. By the way, there's a big difference between worrying and preparing. Okay? Let me give you an example. If today is Tuesday and on Friday I have a project or presentation that I'm worrying about, it is not going to do anything for me. Now, if you tell me, hey, today, what do I need to be prepared? Oh, well, let's say I have to have a certain set of clothes that I want to wear. Okay, I'm going to make sure that that's ready. So I'm not going to stress out on Friday finding out it's not there. Or do I need to get this material? Or do I need to, okay, that's it. That's what I need to do today. But I'm not worrying about it. I'm just preparing for what I want to do. But I don't spend my whole day thinking of all the things that are going to go wrong worrying about Friday. Believe me, it doesn't. And a lot of us make the mistake that thinking that we worry about something, we're preparing for it. It doesn't exist. But unfortunately, as human beings, like I said, between the way our minds work, the messaging we're getting constantly from different sources, we fall into it very, very easily. And by this I mean, sometimes you have to make the effort to pull yourself back and say, stop thinking like that. A lot of people think it comes naturally. No, of course you're going to have to go, snap out of it, stop thinking like that. Or if you fall into that. And especially if you're into one of these people that you do that like almost automatically, yeah, you will have to consciously pull yourself out of that mindset or that train of thought And then as you do it more often, it becomes less and less automatic. Okay? And yes, there's times when it overcomes you and then you have to pull back. But believe me, I'd rather be a happy human being than a worried, unhappy, scared, angry human being. Okay? Because I'll tell you what, and I know this sounds very metaphysical, but it is. Your expectations usually will manifest themselves sooner or later. And by this, and I'm sure some of you will say, sometimes our expectations, if they're negative, somehow or other, we will manifest them. We are very powerful beings. And if we concentrate on something long and hard enough, which unfortunately, the emotions of fear and anger are very powerful, somehow or other, it will manifest in the physical world. It will. And I've tested this theory many, many times. Okay, and it does. So yes, our expectations, if you're hopeful, if you're happy, you have a problem, but you think or you realize, I'm going to be able to find a solution to this. I will find whether your spiritual life, your religious beliefs, whatever it is that's you. You know, if you, however it is that you get there, okay, happy human beings are kinder. Like she was explaining, we're more willing to overlook when somebody acts really ugly towards us, or even help them out. We have more compassion. So yes, by the way, there's nothing wrong with striving to be happy, whatever it is that makes you happy. So again, guys, I hope you like this show. I love speaking to Paige. Like I said, the link to her show is at the bottom. By all means, visit. Like I said, I would hope that in the future there will be many pages offering these services for us human beings. Read her book. Hey, let me tell you something. It sounds like you get a lot for that book. I'm telling you. It's almost like you get a mini reading to go with it. And subscribe to my channel. If there's some type of notification on there, hit it so that you are aware every time I release a show. If you're catching me on YouTube, if you're catching the show on podcast, whatever the case might be. I also live stream on Facebook, on Twitter. And again, true believers, send me your stories. Go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Go to the Submit Your Story tab. And I want to hear what's going on with you guys. Like I said before, whether you want to write it, speak it, have me contact you and you can relay it to me. We'll figure it out. So again, guys, thank you so very much. You're all wonderful. And thank you again for being part of my audience. Take care.